Still the chair of the Northeast Oversight Housing. What? Did that come out?
Yes, that did.
Okay. Welcome to 2020. Glad you're here. It is snowpocalypse, which we know means there is no snow, but but the expectation of the possibility of the rumor that there may be snow on the way, and therefore stay at home, lock the doors. So thanks for those of you who made it out tonight. I figured it would be light, but I didn't want to postpone tonight's meeting because in our next scheduled meeting, we are going to celebrate 5 years of being at this work. Yeah. And we're going to take some time and make it loud to think about how many families have been, emotions. How many families have been impacted, how many people we've helped to stay in their homes, how many units and opportunities now are afforded that people never had before and would not have had if this group had not done the work they've done. And so we think that's worth celebrating and making some noise about. It started at $20 million. It's now over $70 million for affordable housing, and we're not done yet. There's much more to do and much more opportunity. And so I didn't want to postpone this meeting tonight because we need to get some work done tonight. And then in March, we're just going to make it loud and celebrate where we've come and appreciate those who have committed to this work and been willing to roll up their sleeves and run with me in this journey. And there are several who have been a part of this committee as long as I have. And so we want to recognize that. But tonight, we've got some work to do. So hopefully you've signed in. You've got a packet of information. If you have not, please do so. I think everyone who's in the room kind of knows the lay of the room, and so I won't go through all of that. Welcome. I appreciate your presence. We are going to jump right into what we need to jump right into. And so I hope you just took a bite of something so I can pull you up while you're chewing. That would be fantastic. Just kidding. Join us, introduce yourselves, and it is on you. Did you turn this on?
Good evening. My name is Dana Ingram Shepherd, and I manage home ownership programs and home retention programs at the Housing Bureau. And
my name's Ira Bailey. I'm a housing program coordinator at the Housing Bureau, and I'm also a contract manager and liaison for the preference policy.
I am here this evening to give you an update on the progress of the Northeast Strategies home ownership portion and how we're doing as far as preference policy families getting into home ownership. Ira is here just in case there's any specific questions, because they aren't included on the slides, about Portland Housing Center or PCRI and the households that are being served and where they are with any type of mortgage readiness or anything that you have, if you have those questions after I am finished. Oops. I think the last time that I provided an update was in September, so I almost wish I had that information with me so you all can see the difference. But there are a total of 47 families at this point that have been identified through the preference policy.
Yay.
And have received support to become first home buyers. That breakdown is right there. As you all know, we have a really, really aggressive goal for Northeast TIF resources, but through your advocacy, and I think Dr. Holt talked about leveraging other funds and how we've grown our funds. You can see there other sources that have been used. So there's 27 new homeowners with Northeast TIF resources. That includes 9 closings that are happening by the end of February. and 9 with the citywide resources that were set aside. Thank you, Shannon, and the Oversight Committee. Thank you for that. So there's a closing coming up, but then there's one other person that's been awarded that has not found a home. I want to make it clear that for the closings, these are not just awards. These are folks that are in contract. So have a home in the process.
That's great.
So, yes. And then 5 with Prosper Portland. I'm really happy about that one, too. That's a little bit of a harder group of folks to get to because they don't typically come to the Bureau for resources because they believe that they don't qualify usually. So, and again, there's 2 upcoming closings there. And then 6 without PHB subsidy, and 1 closing is coming up. So without subsidy, that means that they have received counseling and education from one of our partners. And our partners that have, we need to actually give them some thanks, that have played a big part in this: PHC and Portland Community Reinvestment Initiatives, and and I think all of our partners, but Habitat, Proud Ground, and NAA. So, and Hacienda, they're receiving, should have just gave this to you. Yes. So anyway, thanks to our partners for providing homebuyer education and counseling, because one of those agencies may have gotten or provided support of some sort back in the day, and then they came through another agency to get the actual DPAL. So just really appreciate all of them. All right. Moving on. Here's just a little snapshot of where we are with the 18 people that have already purchased. We are not including those upcoming closings that we spoke about. Mm-hmm. And I can't see. Oh. So there's roughly... Okay. Here, I'll let you do that.
So of the 18, there's roughly 89% or 16 families are African-American families. 1 family identified as white and 1 family identified as Hispanic. As far as household income, half of the families, or about 10 families, are between 51 and 80% AMI. And that is, again, adjusted for household size. So the number of the actual income can vary depending on who purchased. 4 families are within 81 and 100%, so those are a little bit on the higher income end. But I think it's a great thing that we have 4 families who are in between 30 and 50% AMI who've been able to purchase. And then the purchase prices really range between $250 and recently we had someone who purchased over $400,000 or over $350. So before, in the last presentation, I think $350 was the high end of this, and now we have 1 family that purchased between $350 and $400, and I believe it was about $395, somewhere around there.
I just want to take this back to, while I was giving credit to the partners, just for, if you notice, the Northeast TIF resources, those have been a challenge for us, but I do want to let you all know that much of that success is really because of the Wells Fargo Neighborhood Lift program. Every single one of those 9 upcoming closings also got Lift funds, which is another $20,000. Otherwise, they may have had a very hard time finding a home to purchase in the interstate URA. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you, Shabri.
Yes, yes. Absolutely. All right, so this isn't detailed construction on update on construction timelines or anything. This is just to remind you of the PHB investments for home ownership, new construction, and so it does not include PCRI's new construction at all. So you all are pretty familiar with all of these projects. There they are, and I think they total, what's that, how many units are those? 82? All right, I should have put the total in there, sorry. So that's 82 units in the works, and so Portland Housing Center, for the most part, is assessing the preference policy families to prepare them for occupying and purchasing those units there. All right, So here, I just want to remind you all of our goal that you all approved last December. That was over a year ago now. We increased the goal, but then also increased the timeline. So our new goal is to create 110 new homeowners using North-Northeast TIF resources by 2022. And where we are now, 18 already closed, 9 closing, and then 82 new homeownership units in construction. That would put us at 109 when you add up all that. So I think we are well on our way and doing well towards our goal. Again, it does not include the PCRI units at all, but it does, in the 18, it does include the new construction that PCRI has created as well, but it does not include any other PCRI units that have not been built or sold.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, any questions?
Oversight Committee, questions for Dana or Ira? Yes.
Doesn't like me.
I don't know if she has to push it.
Okay, I think it's working. All right. For the 5020 condos, the estimated completion in June 2021, do you know when the expected closing for that is?
Oh, is she here? She's here. Oh, I think you'll hear a little bit more about that particular development very soon.
Okay,
So I'm
then
not
I will.
sure.
I'll hold my questions.
Okay.
On the
All right.
inside.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, okay.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks for the update.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's good news.
Yes.
It's a much better path than where we were, for sure. Gina, are you going to come to the table? Uh-huh, yeah. Miss Gina Woolley, if you would join us at the table. So good to see you, and Happy New Year to you.
So, hello, everybody. Happy New Year.
Hello.
Gina Woolley, owner's rep for 5020.
Turn that off.
All right, thanks, because, I'm technology challenged. Diane could not be here. She's in another meeting in Tualatin with other PHB people. So I am here tonight, but we had not planned on doing a formal presentation. We weren't on the agenda, but we were asked to be here to answer questions. So I don't know if there's going to be,
There's been no discussion to the entire group. I just was informed a little bit prior to our meeting tonight. So we'll have, unless you want to tee it up, well, either you or
No, I think Shannon should tee it up, and
Okay.
and then I'm here to, answer questions about the mechanics.
Yep,
I
very
think
good.
there are-
Thank you, and thanks for coming.
Yes,
Yep.
Thank you. Shannon Callahan from the Portland Housing Bureau. As we get closer to the closing and the beginning of construction of 5020 North Interstate condos, we are hoping that we will bring this item to council on February 12th. Everything looks like we're on schedule for the 12th. But our team has been working, our team at the Housing Bureau has been working with the team at 5020 North Interstate. And I believe just a few weeks ago, we received the first information on what the Homeowners Association dues will be at 5020. And earlier this week, I got that information from my team. And after we've been doing some active work to understand how the mechanics work on the HOA dues. And the numbers came in, and I wanted to make sure that the committee heard what the HOA dues are, because I know that's been something that you have asked questions about in the past. And so we asked Gina to come here tonight. And Gina, I think that my information I got from via text is that there may be even updated information from conversations this afternoon on the numbers of those. So I can't, our team has really been working with their team very closely. And one of the things that, as Gina goes through this information, I want you to know that we are, at the Housing Bureau, are wanting to make sure that the affordability levels are matching what we see for who's coming in under the preference policy. And Dana and Ira have also done some work regarding the income levels and the percentages that we're seeing of people who are now working with the Portland Housing Center to get ready to buy for 5020. So I think maybe the best thing to do, Gina, is just to kind of talk about what the fee, the association fees, and then I also want to broach a topic of conversation with you based on some of that information and what we're seeing on the affordability levels. So does that seem like a reasonable place to go into the conversation?
Yes.
So could I add a little more context? My understanding is that the evaluation, so the project is being prepared for HIC, for the Housing Investment Council internally to sign off on it. Then it goes to council. And so we've been in this process of sort of everybody looking in detail at sort of the whole structure of the deal. And I think that's where these issues have emerged. They've been there in the numbers, but I don't think everybody sort of put all the pieces together. So nevertheless, my understanding is that one of the concerns is that we have 14 units that are in they're all 3-bedroom units, and they're in the 80 to 100% of MFI. So the other thing I want to say to you is our unit mix, we overachieved from what the RFP originally requested. We have far more affordable units, and we have lower affordability because of our partnership with Habitat than was actually in the RFP. So we've tried to push as many of these units as far down in terms of affordability as we could go, and this is always a challenge in these situations. So we do have these larger units that are in the 80 to 100% of MFI affordability, and the condo fees on those units, those 3-bedroom units, are about $403 a month. Those are the new calculations, Shannon. This information will go to your folks, but what I have to say to everybody is that the way that these affordability, both for Habitat and for Proud Ground, the way that the calculations are done is the mortgage payments for these affordability levels are set, taking into consideration how much of a mortgage can these families carry along with paying their taxes, their insurance, the condo fees, and an administrative fee. All of that is part of the affordability calculation. And in the Proud Ground model, and this has always been the case, though the eligibility to buy a Proud Ground unit, all of those housing costs can exceed 38% of your household income. In the Habitat model, it's 30%. So there's two different eligibility formulas. This has been in all of the outreach information where we did community meetings. All of those thresholds, people don't pay attention to them. They don't necessarily know what they mean, but all that information's been out there. What's happening now is, as you know, in May, I think it was May, was it May or April of last year, we opened up the pipeline for these units, and the people that are in the pipeline and that are moving through the pipeline and got qualified and got prioritized highly there aren't, from my understanding, I haven't seen the numbers, but from my understanding, there aren't a lot of those families that really fit in the 80 to 100% threshold. And so what that means is, unless you're going to buy down some of those other units, there's no way to redo the deal at this point. It's all glued together. Mm-hmm. So the only way to actually think about this is to buy down the affordability so that the families who are in the pipeline and who qualify in every other way can access those units. So I think I want to set the context. That's kind of the issue that we have here at the last minute. But all of our calculations, and the other thing I have to say about the calculations for these affordability, there are some moving parts still, and there will be until these units are sold. So when you think about mortgage payments and principal and interest, if the interest rate changes from now until the time that those units are sold in 18 months, then, you know, that could change how much the mortgage and interest payment amounts are. Some of the other moving parts, but I think we've resolved one of them, is that the insurance payments, mortgage insurance, if the unit doesn't appraise at a certain level, then we will be required, the owners will be required to secure mortgage insurance. But we have the appraisal back now. We didn't have this back in December when we first started this discussion and getting prepared for the HIC meeting. And those units have appraised. That's about $100 less a month that those people will have to pay. So that what PHB looked at was the total cost. We itemized what all those costs are that I just mentioned that go into that calculation. And we had some of these sort of wild cards like the mortgage insurance as an instance in there, because we don't want to qualify families. We want to be conservative in how we estimate these fees, because there's no way, just so you understand, and I'll explain in a minute, what's in the condo fees and how they're established. But there's no way for us to set these condo fees until the units are built, they're platted, which means they're measured, we have a map, and then you do a reserve study. Condo fees are established based on a per square foot cost basis, and until that unit is built and surveyed and all of that stuff and platted, you don't know what that unit is. And we're averaging them for 1-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units, and 3-bedroom units. So there's still moving parts, and they're going to be moving parts. So we're trying to figure out what they won't exceed, with the notion that they very likely could be less, okay? But we don't want to start qualifying families with them being, taking the most optimistic approach, and then have families get down the line and these numbers change, and then they literally are out of the box again. So that's been our approach. Let me talk a little bit about, unless any of you have questions up to this point, and then I'll just talk a minute about what goes into the condo fee so you understand.
I've a host of questions going through my mind, but I'm gonna go ahead and finish the.
I'm happy.
We'll come back around. Yeah, we'll come back to them.
Okay.
We'll come back.
So condo fees are really made up of 2 buckets of expenses, and those buckets of expenses are. Understand that the condo owners only own what's inside their walls. The rest of the structure, all the common areas, the play areas outside, the landscaping, everything is owned in common by all of the owners. And the condo association maintains all of that. So if you had a fire in the building and it burned out, the side of the, part of the siding and tore a hole in the roof and did all of that, it would be the condos association responsibility to fix that, not the unit owners, unless there was, they had insurance and there was some negligence on the part of an owner that caused, and then it would probably be some combination of those, of both parties. But typically, if you think, so there's just the operating expenses to operate that. So you've got janitorial services for the common areas, you've got landscaping outside, you've got the only utility that is included in the condo fees is the garbage, because it's used in common. The water and sewer and all of that are paid by each of the homeowners, and they're metered separately for each unit. But you have essentially a security monitoring system. You have fire inspections that have to be done every year on the building. You have elevator inspections that have to be done every year on the building. You have you have a host, so we have an operating budget that is not insignificantly. Plus, you have to have people. You have an association manager, not somebody who works for the association. I mean, well, they do work for the association, but it's usually a company that professionally does this. that will make sure that all the things that are supposed to get done, and the people that are supposed to get paid to do those things get paid. So you actually have a property management-like association that has to be paid for in their work. You have the accounting, you have all the taxes, all of the financial filings and legal filings that have to be upkept on the building. So there are a lot of expenses, operating expenses, to operate the shell and all of the things owned in common by the owners. And so part of that condo fee is your share on a per square foot cost basis of what that annual operating budget is, okay? And the other part of your per share foot cost is actually, think of it as a savings account for replacing major items, like when the roof needs to be replaced in 15 years. If the windows fail and you need to replace windows on the outside, if storefront fails on the main floor, if you need to repair sidewalks, if one of your pieces of equipment fails, you have access control systems and fire alarm systems and all of that stuff. If any of that stuff fails, it's on the condo association to take care of that on behalf of all the owners. And so part of your fee goes to operate the building, so to everyone's benefit, and part of your fee goes to actually help create a savings account, so there will be money in that savings account when those, you're generally, you're going to have money in the first few years accumulating in that account. Mm-hmm. And it's there so that when you need that money, you have it to do the repairs. If you don't have that money, then in a condo association, you bill the condo owners for the repairs that need to be done. They all pay their proportionate share. So the point here is, and the reserves are mandated by the Oregon, condominium statutes anyway. So those are the two major elements that make this up. And all we do is take those two numbers, create a per square foot cost. Yep. And then you've got however big the unit is, we've averaged the cost for each of these categories of units, and that's how you arrive at your monthly fees.
I appreciate the thoroughness of the explanation. I'm sure there are questions from the Oversight Committee, and we will direct them to Shannon and to Gina. Thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, no problem.
Wow. Jillian.
I just wanted to clarify something you said at the beginning about the AMI percentages. So with the $403 condo association fee, the total housing payment, estimated housing payment, including mortgage, any PMI, utilities, and the
No
association
utilities.
fee
Utilities
are still 38% or less?
The utilities are never included in the affordability calculations for home ownership, only for rental properties.
But then as part of the PITI, the condo fees are included in that 30 or 38%
Yes.
of total household income?
Yes, yes.
Okay. That was my follow-up question.
Thank you. Name tag. Dr. Bates?
So I guess I'm just trying to cut to the chase here, because it sounds like there's already been a conversation with this partner and PHB that is maybe already been briefed to HIC and is planned to go to council. It has not gone to HIC. Okay, well, there's a plan in place. What I wrote down was, we need to buy down the unit affordability. Can we talk about what that dollar amount is, where that is coming from, and what gets substituted out of our programming because of putting the money into here? Like, to me, that's the bottom line. All of this is very thorough, and I have many, many thoughts about this project in general, but this is where we are now, so what's the bottom line?
Yeah, what's our fix?
So Dr. Bates, we were preparing to go to our Housing Investment Committee this week, and we delayed that because we wanted to make sure that we had a better and complete understanding of the HOA dues, and we have been working with Proud Ground over the last, especially even up to about 3:30 this afternoon, trying to make sure that we had a really clear understanding between Proud Ground and the Housing Bureau. And then one of the other things that our team did is, I think as we're looking at the households that are coming in under the preference policy and their incomes, we want to make sure that there are units for people to potentially buy. And right now, the current programming for the 3-bedroom units are, 2 of the 3 bedrooms are affordable between 35 and 60% median family income, which is great. We have 4 available at 60 to 80%, also good. And we have 14 right now of the 3 bedrooms at 80 to 100. And so in looking at and assessing from the Portland Housing Center, the incomes of the people that they're currently working with from who were interested in the Proud Ground property, we have 72 households at the 35 to 80. We have 74 at 61 to 80, and we only have 38 at 81 to 100. And we have obviously more units being programmed for the 81 to 100 MFI level. And so my team came to me and wanted to broach the concept of what could we do to increase the number of units, especially for those folks at the 60 to 80%. And as Gina alluded to, essentially the only way to really do that is to, frankly, fund more of the development so that they are not having to sell these units at a price that's paid for through a mortgage by the homeowners. And so we are I called Diane, I think 2 days ago, and said, would they be willing to consider this? And we have not made any agreements. We have only had a conversation about it. And it is not, we would want to make sure, that's why I'm talking to you tonight and brought this subject up to you, was because we would not want this to go to HIC or City Council without talking to you about what we were thinking. So the Proud Ground project in general, just to remind you, is getting the land in a fee simple basis to the association. We have agreed to put in $5 million in permanent subsidy. The Housing Bureau is making an extraordinary step to finance a portion of the construction loan, which isn't something we would normally not do, but we want to make sure that this project gets built and in a timely manner. And what we think is that depending on the math and how many units we buy down, if we were to, for some reason, buy down all of the 14 of the 3 bedrooms that are at the 80 to 100, that total amount would create a funding gap of $994,000, so about $1 million. If we buy down less of those units, it would be proportional. I literally got this memo from my team tonight at 5 before I left, so I haven't had a chance to talk with Dana and Ira and our construction team about what is the right percentage based on what they're seeing from the housing center that we would want to buy down, because there still are people on this list who are at the higher income levels. So, Dr. Bates, there has been a little bit of money in the interstate corridor that has been an opportunity fund that wasn't programmed, except for on the development side. $1 million is not enough to do a whole new project, but it is there, and essentially what we'd be doing is increasing the amount of the loan and decreasing the amount that's paid back from the construction loan that we're providing. So it would bring the total investment, not including the land purchase value, from $5 million to somewhere near about $6 million. Just so you also know, it is not uncommon for us when we're closing a deal to have some variable in our contribution. We like to manage the projects as tightly as we can, but the reality is that sometimes it does take a little bit of extra funding. I think you've been with us long enough to know that that is indeed sometimes the case. But I wanted to make sure that we were being really transparent about the HOA dues, about the affordability levels, and about what we're seeing at the Portland Housing Center. I do apologize that this is very raw information and that I haven't been able to put together the kind of complete presentation that I'd like to, and I know this is a lot of verbal, but based on the fact that you had a committee meeting tonight, based on the fact that we're, assessing the situation this week, and the fact that we're trying to close the project in February, I thought we needed to have the discussion with you tonight. So I don't have a specific ask necessarily, but I did want to hear
I
your
appreciate
thoughts.
it. Thank you. And that's what I want to give us an opportunity to do. I'd love to hear the thoughts and the response. The question I have before we do that is, so the $1 million potentially to help buy down the 14 units does what in terms of what's the impact for programming that either that is happening, the other programming that's happening, and or potential programming that we've talked about? So how does that $1 million impact if it gets directed this way?
So as I said, it is not in any of the other buckets. So we hadn't spent exactly the exact dollar amount down from the North and Northeast. And I'm sorry, Leslie, I don't know if you had a chance to get the budget numbers precisely.
No, I'm sorry. No, Mike and I talked about it, but because we're so deep in budget, I just didn't have time to get the exact numbers. But we do have some that is not programmed that we could use to do this. The exact number is not on my brain.
The last I had looked, it was about $1.2 million that was in the Opportunity Fund for Development. So that does not include any of the money that we've committed to home repair or any of the money that we've committed to other home ownership projects. TIF dollars, I think you're aware, sometimes change in terms of the values that we're getting based on property taxes done by the assessor, and Prosper updates us. When we last talked about finalizing the projects, which was, gosh, some time ago, I think the last big move we made was that the Argyle increase in price, and then the Strong family purchase. At the time, I think we said, that was pretty much the end of what we could do for major development. Frankly, I think the question is, what would you be foregoing? And we have not brought you a proposal on that money, whether we'd move it into another category or not. But I am bringing this to you because I think that I want to make sure that we get as many preference policy families into these units as we can at the right income levels. And I do believe that I'm going to tell you that I believe we should buy down a certain number of those units to better align with the people that we have coming in the door. I think having that many 3-bedrooms available at a higher income level, it would be a shame to lose that opportunity when we have more families coming in at the 60 to 80%. And so that is honestly why I came to talk with you about it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. We're just going to go around the table. So I'll begin with you, Dr. Bates.
Well, so, as I said, I have a lot of thoughts about this whole situation, but I can sum them up by saying that once again, we're sitting here with a choice of putting more dollars into a project that's already down the road a ways, or not having the project. And it's not really a choice, or not achieving the goals that we want to achieve. And this is the manyth building that we've been talking about where we're doing that. And it's not really a choice. We're either gonna put the dollars in because we're stuck, or what? Or throw up our hands and go, oh, well, we don't achieve the things that we want to achieve. Because whatever choices and whatever things that happened before, there aren't enough people that match these units who heard the word and put in their applications and got on this list. So I feel like this is not really a choice that we're making at this point, but a capitulation to a situation that perhaps could have been avoided. We do not see any of these project pro formas. So I have no idea what is going on in the financing of any of these buildings that have requested more money, or what other things they can trim from their development fees and et cetera.
They're not requesting. We're not requesting more money. This isn't we can build the project if PHB was. Sorry.
End of day, there's a request for more money in order to achieve goals for the project, and there have been many choices made that lead up to that. this is not only in this building, but in the other buildings that we also had to add more money. I would feel less distress about that were we not also being told over the course of the past year, as we come to the sunsetting end of TIF money, that there will be no other public resources put into this area of the city. We've talked about this many times, that bond money is going to be prioritized out of ICURA because there's already money here, that other housing resources will not be continue to focus here, and that we're done with our programming. Correct? That's the state that we're in.
Dr. Bates, the Portland Housing Bond had a strategy that was created by the community which prioritized putting housing dollars where there weren't other available resources, and they specifically called out not putting resources in TIF districts that had funds. Obviously, if there's a future, the district no longer has development funds in it, so it is a different case scenario than it would have been when the implementation strategy was done. I don't think your work here in North and Northeast or our work here is done. I don't know what what the statement you made by your work, but our work in North and Northeast is by no means done. But I do think that the concept of being able to dedicate additional funds to this district by increasing maximum indebtedness is something that the Housing Bureau supports, and I believe you support as well, for work directly under the Oversight Committee. And I am honestly very sorry to bring this problem to you, to talk with you about tonight, but I would be remiss in what I think our team's recommendations are based on all of the factors that we're considering, and I would, if I did not broach something, or if I let this building go forward without having a discussion of buying down those income levels, I think it would be something that I would regret, because I want to make sure that I'm getting the folks that we can matched in with these units. And I am very, very sorry that I'm bringing this to you at the last minute. It is not where I would like to be, and I apologize to all of you for that.
I don't have a problem with that, but I want to come back to this larger question. This group did not say that it thought that the bond strategy of denying bond funds into this area was a good idea, and we represent the community. There's a lot of money. There's also a metro bond, and maybe we need to revisit that conversation now that people understand what it means and that there isn't money left here. The maximum indebtedness process is, as we've talked about it for a year, a multi-stage, multi-agency political process that is not instantaneous.
So,
and yet,
Dr. Bates, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think what I was trying to tell you is that now that the district funds are out, it's not the same situation as with the direction of the housing bond was to not spend in an area where there were existing URA resources. So the same would not hold true anymore for interstate as it would 2 years ago when there were funds when the bond housing strategy was created. And so what I'm trying to say is that has changed with the lack of funding in the district.
2 years ago, we knew that the path of this development program was going to zero out the dollars. We've talked many times about the shrinking opportunity set for land acquisition, for building acquisition in this area. And I actually don't really want to talk about this problem that much because, as I said, I think we're in a pincher. This is what we need to do because we want to see folks on this list get these units. Great. What comes next? And I would like to see movement on a larger conversation about how a strategy that says that North and Northeast is for everyone. North and Northeast is for the community that has historic ties here. And that it's not okay for it to just completely tip into exclusion plus 3 or 4 buildings that we can feel good about. And that it's not okay that we are going to put all the affordable housing in some whole other part of town where then all the poor people get to live are there. Like, we are not choosing that as a community anymore. So I just want to move on to a conversation that says, how do we actually talk about the big goals of this strategy in an environment when we are suddenly have way more housing resources than have existed in the past? Totally inadequate, grossly inadequate still. But yet they're there, and to my mind, inexplicably, I've heard you explain this before, that the community said they wanted this. I find it illogical, irrational, and anti-Black to have said from the start that there would not be bond funding in this area, given the priority and the weight and the historic reparation that was needed for Northeast Portland. That's me as a community person saying that. So I just want to move into a conversation about how we actually meet all of these needs. These so many people on these lists, so many people who want to have access.
Yep. Thank you. Jillian? Thank you, Dr.
Thank you. I have a totally different line of questioning, or questions, I should say, not questioning. So I'm curious, do you know, Gina, if there was a market study done? Because when I do kind of a little quick back of the napkin calculation here, it seems like the 3 bedrooms are selling for the 100% AMI, 3 bedrooms would be selling for about $450. Is that about right?
Jillian, I'm not going to be able to knowledgeably answer your questions without my.
She has it.
It shows here 3 bedrooms selling for, the mortgage is $274.
Is that for the, is that?
For 80 to 100%. And the payment is
Can you come to the mic, please? Thank you.
Yeah.
What I have here is an estimated HOA fee of $417 versus $403, but it shows that the 3 bedrooms are selling for $274 with an all-in monthly mortgage payment of $1,973.
Well, the mortgage is $294.
The price, the sales price, $274,000.
So the mortgage and interest would
Yes.
be on that amount minus their small down payment. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, so, but then plus the $125,000 per unit. So 274 plus $125,000 in subsidy per unit is about $500,000.
It sounds like you're speaking about a down payment assistance, which is not falling on top. The investment was made in the construction.
Yes.
Yes.
So the
These are
sales price
permanently affordable.
directly to the buyer is based on this from Proud Ground, is $274,000.
Okay. I think I have my answer. So my next question is, do you know of what value engineering steps were taken in addition to, perhaps getting more funds? Was there a value engineering exercise as well?
Yes, and we're still value engineering. So we have a final bid in, and we have a list of items that can be value engineered. This isn't about our budget balances. This is not about us needing more money to do this deal. Mm-hmm. This is about somebody else controlling our pipeline that goes into our building, and that pipeline not matching with the way that we've got the units. And that's not anybody's fault. That's really just about the need that's out there. We did as many 3-bedroom units and pushed them as low, because we know that's what the need is, as we could, and still make it all fit together. So nobody's at fault here. We actually have spent a lot of time talking about the materials that go on this building, because we want the materials to hold up well, because if they don't hold up well, that's a cost back to the buyers, right? I mean, so we've minimize the kind of routine maintenance that needs to be done, how much you have to paint window seals and do all of that. The quality of materials is, we've paid a lot of attention to that, and even the design of how the materials go together on the outside to make sure that if we have that savings account to pay for things, that we don't have a lot of other kind of ongoing maintenance that's just going to drive up those costs. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's,
No, I understand. It's you pay now or you pay later.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Did you have any other question?
Yeah, my last question is I didn't hear, or I was busy writing, that $1 million to buy down the AMI buys it down for how many units?
That would be the 14.
All 14 units
All
will then
14
be
of
bought
80
down?
to 100%.
So the folks that submitted an application for a 3-bedroom unit who are at 80 to 100% will not qualify?
Jillian, I'm sorry, what I was trying to say is that we have not determined the number of units that we would be buying down. I have not had that level of conversation
Okay.
with my team yet. But what I was trying to give you is if all of those were to have been bought down, what the total price tag would be. But I need to talk to Dana and Ira. All of this information is literally just
Brand new.
emerging from the Portland Housing Center, because trust me, I don't like to show up here without a great presentation and material and talk to you verbally, because I know that is very confusing.
I know, and I appreciate that. I think when asking for my feedback in particular, if that buys down 2 units, then that is a terrible price tag. If that buys down 14 units, then that's a more reasonable price tag. So without knowing the dollar amount and a per unit calculation might be better. But I also want to say that it sounds like there's 30 plus people applied for a preference at the 80 to 100. Is that right?
The number I heard.
38. So my question back to you when trying to figure out how many of these to buy down to a lower AMI would be to look at the scoring and what percentage, right? Like I don't want someone who is at 80 to 100% but has the maximum score to then be excluded because we bought down the mortgage. Does that make sense? Like if we make it 60 to 80 and someone makes 90% of AMI and they were displaced by Emmanuel, they would be at the top of the preference policy. So I don't want someone who's at the top of the preference policy to then be excluded because of how much money they make or don't make. So I think that if I were to rank how many units to buy down, first I would want to know how many people have the maximum score of that 30 whatever, or the 70 that are in the middle, or the 70 that are at the low end. And then that would guide my decision about how to allocate funds. Because I think the priority that I would make are the people that were most affected by displacement.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Tristan, want to hear from you? Thoughts? So I'm coming all the way around the table, so, yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't really have too many more questions than what's been asked, but I think my initial thoughts is actually what Dr. Bay's initial thoughts is. Looking at this $1 million and the question that's presented is that really a choice? I don't want to be extreme. It almost seems like somewhat of strong arm. Like there's not, if it's what's presented and it can help accomplish a goal that we've set, then it's not really a choice whether we want to do it or not. But the only question I would really have is what impact, as Jillian mentioned, is that $1 million really having? And where's that really going? And if it's buying down, if it's 1 or if it's 14 or if it's 30, I'd rather have that number and kind of understand that impact. But if it really gets us one step back to, in the direction in which we want to go in order to accomplish our goals, then I don't see why anybody would say anything but the opposite, but that.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Ms. Virgie.
Question I have is concerning the units that we're talking about right now are we trying to sell these units? Is that the main priority? Are we trying to lease or rent?
These are all owned.
These units are
These
all
are
for
all owned.
sale.
All owned, okay.
The whole building, all the units in the building are for sale.
Okay.
There are no rental units.
And then each strata, the low strata, the medium, and the high, you have people that qualify or
They're in the
have the.
pipeline that's being managed by PHB and the Portland Housing Center. So the pipeline is separate. That's what the preference policy is. This is one of the challenges of the preference policy when you've got a home ownership. Not so much with probably a rental property, but with a home ownership, our bank wants to know, how are you got to have sales price that take out the construction loan when you're all done. Minimally. And so, it's either got to come from the sales price, or it's got to come from a combination of the sales price and subsidies. And these units are already subsidized. Many of them are even more deeply subsidized. But the bottom line is that the people who are in the pipeline that are moving forward in the pipeline don't align well, and that isn't anybody's fault. It's just, this is the second round, Shannon, of the home ownership. Yeah, so you're learning who's coming in there and who's really being able to qualify on your side of the ledger, and it's a learning process. That's not a process we're controlling. We're just trying to match ourselves up to it as best we can, as we move through the development process.
How many of the people in the pipeline are impacted by these two standards? The one that you have as a contractor versus what the financial institution, the bank, wants?
I don't think that all of the people are going to be basically are going to be under operating. They're going to be underwritten under the same standard. That's the developer's issue. It's not the homeowner's issue.
Well, how does the bank, does it present itself as a barrier for these people to get housed?
No,
Okay.
the bank that we're getting the construction lending for isn't going to be doing any of the homeownership purchase. Isn't going to be financing any of the homeownership purchases. There are other folks that are in that business that Proud Ground has worked with for a long time in the state that understand the model, and will be working very closely with the buyers once those buyers are turned over to us.
So is it safe to believe that everyone that's in the pipeline will end up with home ownership through this?
No, because there's not enough units. I think you've got way more people in your pipeline. You've got, what did you end up with, 670 people that signed up, and I don't know how many people are left in the pipeline, but this is a 64 unit. That's the other issue, which is the issue Dr. Bates is talking about. Just the supply doesn't match up to the demand, and we know that. That's from a policy standpoint.
How about the preference policy? Are all of these in the pipeline preference policy people?
Yes, yeah.
So it's just a matter, if they don't get in on this building, they'll be on the next list for another building offer.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay.
That's
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
process by which we're operating. So the potential is, yes. The goal is to, well, I'll make my comments in a moment. Marlon, turn your mic on, please, sir.
Madam Shepherd, did you say that the mortgage is 1973?
No, that's the all-in housing cost that includes the principal and the interest and the taxes and the insurance and the condo fees. That's the amount, that's the total cost, monthly cost, housing cost for all of those items.
Oh, okay, so that includes everything.
That includes everything.
All right. Except utilities.
Except utilities. Well,
So that 400
garbage is included, but not electric and,
So that $403 condo fee, or
that's just for the 3 bedrooms. The 2 bedrooms are $301 and the 1 bedroom is Well, the one-bedrooms are all market rate, so it doesn't really.
And that's included in 1973? I just want to be
Well,
clear.
it won't, 1973 is the all-in cost for the 3 bedrooms.
Okay.
We have a different all-in cost for the 2 bedrooms.
But the 1973 includes the 403?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's for the 80 to 100%.
Yes.
And these are classified as affordable units?
And then there are 14 of those,
And these are classified as affordable units?
between
The,
the 80 and 100% AMI, yes.
the difference of a pricing, just to let you know, in the 60 to 80% unit, all-in price is about $1,522 for the HOA dues and the mortgage payment. So
And the insurance and then the taxes.
So you said something earlier, you had 2 different percentages. Were those percentages the amount of, the percentage of their income that would go towards?
Habitat has a different underwriting model, and we have, I think, about 13 Habitat subsidized units in here that are 2- and 3-bedroom units. And those are for families at 35 to 60% of median income, and those units are, you can't have a total cost of more than 30%. That's where of your total monthly income.
Okay.
So there's just 2 sets of calculations depending on how deeply subsidized the unit is.
What was the 30% total income, what was the other percentage you gave?
38 for all of the other units, for affordable units.
All right.
And these are models, for example, these are models that Proud Ground's been using for 20 years to help people buy affordable, get into homes affordably. So they've used it, the underwriting formula has never changed for the Proud Ground model.
Appreciate it. That, good?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Gina, for coming tonight and spending some time to help talk about this. And I appreciate the thoughtful engagement of the Oversight Committee. As you see, there are layers that go into what we are concerned about. And I think that every one of us, and if I'm off, please let me know, but I think that each of us who sit in this space want to make sure that we're hitting the goals, and that we're hitting our numbers, and that we're doing everything we can to help families get into spaces and ultimately into ownership, because ownership is what stabilizes community, it's what generates revenue, it's the only thing that's going to help to address the disparity and what's brought us to this moment, which therefore means to me the broader conversation that you indicated. I think at some point we've got to engage around. We've got to talk about where we go from here. Now that we're at this space, what does this mean for the families and the people who've been so impacted around these other dollars that are now possibilities? I think that's the conversation that we're going to have, and I'm certainly going to encourage that we do as we go forward. So thank you very much for tonight. I appreciate it. Thank you. And we're going to go forward. Yes, Dr. Baines.
Well, I just wanted to say in following up, my frustration or my anger is not about the intentions of anyone in this room. My frustration is that across 2 mayors, I think 3 bureau directors now, many meetings, more than 5 years, I would say.
Yes, I would agree.
Community has driven the city to take on a framework that could be transformative. And it is deeply meaningful for the people who are able to access it. And yet this strategy is hamstrung continually by the things that happen outside of this room and a conversation that I don't fully see, right? It's not visible to me or legible to me completely about these conversations in other spaces that have made choices about what I believe is an under-resourcing of this work. And if the city really believes that the work of addressing its long legacy in Northeast Portland of deeply damaging public policy is at the core of its responsibilities going forward, then we have to be real about putting real resources into that. We can't cap
Agreed.
that and say, well, you had a little bit of millions, so therefore that work is done. And that's not what's happening. The next fiscal year budget directive calls out a specific geography that isn't this for anti-displacement and equitable development work. We gotta do it here.
Agreed,
Because
100%.
this city here has to be for all of us. It has to be for
Absolutely.
people who are deeply rooted here. And so I am just asking for us to talk about, think about, and figure out what is the advocacy that we need to be doing. What are the spaces? What are the conversations? Who needs to hear us say, as we've been saying over multiple years, that this is not enough?
Agreed. I support the concern and the angst and the energy around it 100%. And I think that is something that we take up as an issue to address. We have a new opportunity. There are new resources to address this historic inequity, or the historic inequities, especially as it relates to North and Northeast Portland. So I agree with you 100%. We'll take another comment, and then we'll roll to our next item. So thank you, Dr. Bates.
I know that right now the Housing Bureau is implementing the Portland Housing Bond, and that implementation strategy is kind of set as the Bureau moves on to the Metro Housing Bond and does community engagement work, specifically as it relates to preference policy and funds coming into Northeast Portland. I think when we talk about community feedback and community-driven, that's great, but the majority of Portland is not Black, and there's a lot of racism here. And so that community feedback has to be balanced. Part of it isn't through an equity lens. That's one of the goals of the Metro Bond framework, is that all of the funds be viewed through an equity lens. And while community feedback is great, acting on that feedback, if that feedback is racist, is not is supporting white supremacy, and it's not looking at the funds and how they're distributed with a lens of equity. So I would encourage the Bureau to continue to engage with the community and take that feedback, but to actually apply the equity lens that's supposed to be applied, and to do the anti-racism work that is part of the goal of the bond.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks for that comment. I will add one piece to it. Part of the challenge with the Metro Bond is defining what is meant by racial equity. It's been part of the challenge that we've been having. You know, I sit on that bond, and so pushing us into that space of taking the ownership to be courageous enough to call it what it needs to be called and think like it needs to be thought. It's an interesting process, but well taken. Point well made. Now we are actually going to have you talk about the update for Williams and Russell. Thank you.
So we had a meeting here last week, a community engagement meeting that was, I thought, really productive and had a lot of generative ideas about what the priorities of the property should be. There was a lot of feedback about economic development, and which was one of the committee's priorities, as well as housing and what kind of housing and ownership and how that can, and a lot of good ideas about how that can benefit the community. I know that meeting is posted online. I think I got an email with it, but I'm not sure if it's posted on the website yet, the video from the meeting.
Yes, I don't know.
Yeah. So there is video. It will be posted on the website, and there's not anything and no decisions to be brought to the committee today, but just keeping up. It's the 1.7, for those who may not know, there's 1.7 acres that's currently owned by Legacy that was taken through
City Action.
Yeah, City Action, and along with a lot of other acres. So it's a small piece of land with a big meaning and a big significance, as far as it's a drop in the bucket, but it's a drop in an empty bucket, so it's kind of meaningful. So that's about it. It's on Williams and Russell, and yeah, happy to answer any questions that anyone has after the meeting.
Our next meeting for the Williams and Russell.
It's the first Wednesday of every month, right here.
Excellent, excellent. And my understanding is the next conversation will be processing all of that community engagement work that has happened to move to the determination and prioritization of what's been selected and then move into development.
And I wanted to just bring to this committee a comment that I heard in my working group as we were talking about homeownership and the preference policy, and that is to encourage that preference, people who have gone through the preference policy can access funds in other areas of the city. That she felt very pushed into being in Northeast Portland when she had opportunities in other areas, and that it almost felt like redlining again. And that was her comment. That's just wanted to put that out there. But the access to funds in other parts of the city is making a really big difference. I think we're seeing that with the number of people who are buying homes that have come through the preference policy but are accessing other sets of funds. So that was somebody who's been through who has now a homeowner, so she's very happy with the end result, but that was her feeling during the process. And so I just wanted to bring that feedback to the committee.
Thank you very much. Committee members, any questions for Jillian? Yeah, or comments?
You're speaking about the property down, the way down here?
Yeah,
So-
on the corner of Williams and Russell.
So
Russell and Williams.
there hasn't been a decision on whether it's going to be single family units or condo or anything like that? Are you still in?
There's
No,
been
not-
no firm decision. I guess it could be single-family homes, but there's not a lot of space for single-family homes right there.
So there are priorities that have been identified. Housing is a priority, community.
Yeah, so the three main priorities that were identified were housing, economic development, and community space. And the question that we brought to this community engagement was, what does that mean to you? Housing, what kind of housing? Home ownership, affordable, rental, a mix there. Does it look like retail? Does it look like a school? Does it look like a park? What does community space look like to you? And so kind of getting a little bit more of a drill down in feedback on those three priorities.
With the overlay that part of the charge was that there be some opportunity around generational wealth creation. So that's part of the determining factor that will drive out of these priorities what it looks like. So, and what's real, what's realistic, what can be done, and et cetera. Yeah. So it's got its own layers. Yeah. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Thank you, Jillian. Thanks for your commitment to the work. Thank you for being a part of the Williams and Russell work. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Goodlow.
I just wanted to add that Prosper is planning to hopefully take a recommendation to their board in March regarding the inclusion of the Williams and Russell project in the interstate TIF district. So just wanted to add that to the update.
It is not. It is not a part of the URA. Yeah. Okay. Matthew Schabold, sir.
Okay, good evening. I will be a little briefer because we're running a bit behind schedule. But I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have. So, here to give an update on the preference policy, where we are right now. You just talked about 5020 North Interstate. At the November meeting, we talked a little bit about Magnolia 2, and we have a bit of an update for you on Magnolia 2. And we are pleased to announce that we're in the middle of a new application round. And so we're currently in the process of getting applications for Songbird, King & Parks, and Renaissance Commons. So some of the members who were not at the meeting, who weren't able to make the meeting in November, did not see these numbers, and so I wanted to represent them just really briefly. These are the application breakdowns for the Magnolia 2 application round. Again, we opened that round for 2 weeks in September and processed all of the applications and transferred them to the property management at Magnolia 2 just before Thanksgiving, and they're working with the applicants as we speak. And so you can see the point spread across the applicants, and I mentioned this in November, it's fairly standard. for what we see in most application rounds, both in terms of the number of applications by point cohort, as well as the number of eminent domain applications. And then on the next slide, you can see the breakdown by race and ethnicity. Again, this is a pretty standard breakdown that we see in our application rounds, which also matches the historic community in North and Northeast Portland and the historic community that experienced the city's condemnation and other urban renewal actions. So an update since the November meeting. So as a reminder, the Magnolia 2 has 47 preference policy units. The leasing is in progress, as I mentioned. 9 households have moved in. There are 6 that are approved for move-in. I think this data is about a week or so old. And of those households, 7 are eminent domain, and 6, all others are 6-point households. So we're pleased to know that folks are starting to come off the list and actually move into the building or be ready to move into the building.
Awesome.
And then the last update we've got, as I mentioned, on the 6th of January, we opened up a new application round. The application window will be open through February 21st. It's the longest we've had an application window open, and it just has to do with the volume of units that we're bringing online with our partner organizations. So we've got 49 preference policy units in King Parks, 189 in Renaissance Commons, and then 20 in Songbird. And you can see the bedroom count and the income levels there on the slide. So please, for folks that are here, help spread the word. In your packet also, there is a FAQ. You have an FAQ, just an overview of the preference policy and an FAQ as just a reminder of questions that folks might have. And you also have a one-pager on the 3 buildings that we're leasing up. And so the last slide, folks can apply online at this website. They can call this phone number, email this email address, or come to the Housing Bureau, or get in touch with PCRI or REACH or Bridge Housing to get more information. So please help us spread the word in order for us to get as many applicants as possible for these 3 buildings. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate it. Questions, committee? Give you a moment to look through things. Just hang out for a sec.
You got it.
It's pretty exciting to be bringing this amount of unit mix on at one time. That's pretty exciting to me. Questions, committee? Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate it. We have, from Portland State University, coming in at 5 foot. No, it's fine. The starting position of lead instructor, Dr. Bates. Take us through.
Here. Okay. All right, so I'm here on behalf of myself and my colleague, Dr. Ami Thurber. We're both faculty at PSU. Obviously, you know, I'm usually sitting over there. In May, we shared that we had garnered some resources from PSU to start some preliminary assessment of experiences of people who have been housed via the preference policy. And so over the summer, we started that evaluation with surveys and interviews and focus groups with folks living in the first 3 preference policy rental buildings. And so I want to share with you some of those preliminary findings.
Wonderful.
Yeah. One thing I'm noticing is there's a little bit of a cross-platform formatting problem with the slides. So I will provide a cleaner copy of that tomorrow morning so that can be shared out more. aesthetically pleasing. Okay, so again, broadly, what we have been looking at is a concept of well-being, so personal and community well-being. We wanted to understand how those who are intended to be served by the preference policy, those who have personal and intergenerational ties in North and Northeast Portland, are experiencing their time in the neighborhood, whether they're returning to the community or they've been here and they've been sort of moved their housing into this more stable, affordable housing, but to see how that is going for them. So really trying to hear very directly from residents as a way to support our work as the Oversight Committee and the Housing Bureau in evaluating how the policy is going, knowing that people are being housed, but that community is more than housing. The concept of the policy was that living here in this neighborhood provides something more than just a place to live, but it provides an emotional, social connection. And also, we know that this policy has gained a lot of national attention because it is very groundbreaking to have defined a preference policy around past harms of urban renewal. And so there is a lot of interest to know how it is going. So our objectives in our surveys, interviews, and focus group were to understand residents' motivations for applying to the preference policy, to learn about their early experiences in the neighborhood, and to start to gather recommendations from them about how their well-being might be improved around social, cultural, civic, economic, and environmental factors. So again, over the summer, we went through the first 3 buildings, and surveyed, interviewed, and then held some focus group conversations, a group conversation. And the percentages there is the percent of preference policy units where we had a complete survey. So actually a pretty high response. And most folks were very interested in participating. For the most part, today I'm going to talk about the survey results. I have some illustrative quotes from interviews and focus groups, but we're still kind of combing through that really rich qualitative data and the stories that people have. So the first thing I can say is that when it comes to serving long-term residents and people with long-term connections in North and Northeast, that the preference policy is serving that population. Clicking forward. I guess my thumb is not as powerful as I thought it was. So the residents that we heard from have lived, most of their life in the neighborhood, and they are predominantly Black or African American. That compares this 84% Black folks that we surveyed. It is a diverse mix of people in all of these buildings, but it is quite different from the overall demographics of PHB's portfolio, which is about 19% Black. So the sort of historic experience of North and Northeast Portland as a predominantly Black neighborhood is being reflected in these numbers. And it's also really significant because the areas where these buildings are, really in the core of Northeast, particularly on MLK, are the neighborhoods that are losing people of color faster than other neighborhoods across the city.
Yeah.
So it's potentially of community scale impact. But many residents have been living in North and Northeast, but also have been moving from across the city and even outside of the city of Portland as they found about this opportunity. So in asking this question of where people move from and why they move, we wanted to try to get into the question of one of the sort of underlying assumptions of the policy, which is that place matters to people, right? And find out, are people moving here because they care about this place? And we found that they sure do. While, of course, people who are moving into these regulated affordable housing units need affordable housing, And many of them did think this was their best chance to get into housing from a wait list because they were able to get a priority placement on the wait list. That 80% reported that their connection to the neighborhood was their primary motivation for applying to this opportunity. They were really interested in being here or coming back here, and felt strongly in the interviews that this is home, and that this is, of course, a motivation. You know, one said, there's nothing wrong with wanting to live around your own people. That it wasn't really about convenience of a location, but really about the sense of history and community. People who, and in general, that feeling of being linked in community, having a place connection and a feeling of security and belonging is linked to well-being and to health outcomes in general. So that idea that we are directly speaking to root shock, the feeling of displacement that folks have, and sort of possibly this is a replanting opportunity. People have extremely strong place attachments who live in these buildings in the preference policy. They, as you can see, 9 out of 10 say that the history of the neighborhood matters to them. Most that have friends and family who are in the neighborhood, and they feel that they belong. And this is significant compared to research in the National Survey of Health Attitudes that was put together by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Only 19% of adults in the United States report a strong emotional connection to their community.
Wow.
So this is a pretty powerful finding, I think. Residents are saying, in fact, that their well-being is improved by living in the community again. This is, as we've talked about many times, an opportunity-rich neighborhood. Miss Leslie, is there a secret to this?
You want me to work it for you? I can click it for you.
Over
at the.
Okay, no, I think I've now found the right way to hold my hand. So even though the convenience and location wasn't a primary motivation for people to want to be here, once they are experiencing it, they certainly rate the community, this physical neighborhood and its infrastructure and what's available to them as being very positive, and often more positive than places that they were moving from, particularly things around being able to walk, feeling safe on sidewalks, and having amenities. People do agree that there's parks and rec and stores, as well as it being a good place to raise a family. At the same time, as I think we've talked about in committee a number of times, there's also agreement that there are not necessarily, okay, yes, click the clicks. Can you advance it? That.
Just tell me.
Okay.
We'll see.
If you go closer, okay, great. So.
I got it right here.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And folks are able to participate in activities more so than they were, and I think this is especially for people who are moving out of North and Northeast. So we're in the summer, of course, we were talking to people about, Good in the Hood and all the other kind of cultural activities that are close by Northeast Portland that people wanted to participate in, and they can because they're back in the physical area and they're able to get here. A quarter of people reported they had increased their civic engagement, their volunteering and activities in the community since moving in just a short period of time. And they do find that getting around is more convenient. This is, again, higher than typical civic engagement. Usually we would expect to see under a third of adults or older teens that participate in volunteering and civic engagement. We'll find out more about this as we get more deeply into the qualitative analysis. But in general, people said that they were experiencing a lot of positive changes. At the same time, there are some risks, some vulnerabilities in their well-being, and we don't want to, brush past those. So about half of people felt that it's it's not really possible to find a good job in the neighborhood. A lot of people spoke to the problem of stores and other amenities that don't match with their incomes. So a lot of conversation about groceries and an expressed desire to be able to support Black businesses and feeling like many Black businesses were gone, and wanting to be able to do that. Some residents are still very precariously housed. They're spending a lot of their income on housing despite living in a regulated, affordable building. And so there was some concern expressed about how they might be able to remain housed and whether there would be challenges there over a longer period of time. I think perhaps more concerning was uneven experiences around inclusion in the neighborhood. So remembering that the vast majority of people said, I feel that I belong here, I feel connected, and I have friends and family. And most do believe that people of different backgrounds get along in the neighborhood, but more than a third felt there's a lot of prejudice in the neighborhood, or experienced discrimination in area businesses, mostly around race or perceived income. And most people in the interviews described tense experiences and prejudice in the community itself with neighbors. We heard about, this is a story about, sort of being filmed by a neighbor while carrying a ladder, or other conflicts about people sort of walking on the street, or being imagined to be part of concerning situations, even though they had nothing to do with them. Now, while we were not at all, we did not set out to assess the buildings themselves or people's relationships with providers or any of the provider partners' business practices. We did hear about issues with building design and neighbor relations that do speak to the way that the choices that have been made. People had a lot of recommendations for things like activities in the community that would help them to feel welcome or meet neighbors, for example, resident services that they would like to see, and we'll be able to report more about those ideas, I think, at a later time. And then in terms of design, issues about unit size, amenities in the buildings, accessibility for persons with disabilities, and parking all came up, all things we've talked about in this committee. But I think useful to understand in terms of what future housing opportunities in terms of the actual physical buildings would sort of link up to folks' needs. So in terms of our sort of implications or takeaways, if you will click us forward, thank you, that again, being able to live in a neighborhood where people have strong place attachments and social ties matters really deeply to many. It's not just a way to get affordable housing. It is about the housing in a place that people are experiencing their situations as improved and as more connected. At the same time, the changing community, the gentrification, the different experience here, they do experience as a tension and is not supportive of well-being. And overall, I think that sort of thinking about health, well-being for individuals, families, and communities, we know that affordable housing is necessary, but it's not sufficient. So as we conceptualize community well-being, this is not coming up, I'm sure, very well to people who are far away, but there are different dimensions that we tried to touch in our study to understand social interaction, experience as a place, civic participation, and then some of the bigger physical things about access in the neighborhood, that people have strong well-being kind of on one side of this diagram where it comes to their personal social connections, place attachments, and civic engagement. But then there are other areas that really could be supported around inclusion in the broader community and neighborhood, as well as access to jobs, access to affordable services and needs that they have. And so we thought, what we have is a North-Northeast neighborhood housing strategy, but what if there was a broader North-Northeast community development strategy that would be able to speak to our whole selves and the way that we live in place. So our next steps are going to be to complete this qualitative analysis and report all of our findings in quite a bit greater detail. We can come back to this committee, of course, at any time. And we'll also be coming back around to the residents in the buildings. We did share out the survey results with folks in the buildings already, but we'll come back around and share, what we learned from other buildings and what we learned from the interviews and focus groups with residents and ask them about their reactions, their ideas, and whether they're interested in some next research steps that they would collaborate to create, where they can ask the questions and address the concerns as they define them. And so we are interested in looking at changes over time. We know there's a lot more units coming online, and so we're looking for more resources to continue the study. We had a seed grant from PSU, and we'll be able to continue to look for ways to catch up with all the residents we already talked to, and also add on new units as they come on and see how this strategy plays out over time. So, if there's any questions? Thoughts?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate the work. It's great to, so interesting that we stepped into this more than 5 years ago. You are correct. And began this process of intentional strategic engagement with the hope of benefiting communities and people who have been beyond marginalized, beyond gentrified, we will say traumatized repeatedly, and how we can begin to do something. This is by no means reparations. This is not even necessarily restorative justice. This is beginning to scratch the surface of how we do community. I had mentioned early on, and I haven't talked about it as much, but I had mentioned early on under the initial mayor that this began with, that it's more than bringing people back to place. It's more than bringing people back to buildings. It's more than bringing people back to a neighborhood. It is connecting them to community. It's connecting them to opportunity. It's connecting them to relationships. So it has to be more than housing. It needs to be economic. It needs to be job creation. It needs to be business. There are more than houses that were lost. There were businesses that were lost. And so hearing this again for me just reiterates that this is a much broader work and a much deeper strategy, and we've got much to do. While it's worth celebrating what we've accomplished, this is only a portion of the work. So thank you very much, Dr. Brates, for your activity in this. Marlon.
Yes, Dr. Bates, were you able to survey or interview any folks who are homeowners that from the preference policy? No. Is there a plan in the future?
Yes.
Sweet.
In this study, we only spoke with renters in the two buildings there on MLK and then on Interstate in Lombard, I think it is. But
One
yes.
other question. Did you do all of this during your sabbatical?
Sorry?
Did you do all of this during your sabbatical?
Yes. During my sabbatical.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate
Not a vacation. It was a research vacation.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments?
Can we make a recommendation to Portland Housing Bureau to to further support Dr. Bates in this endeavor, since we have yet to have a...
We can always make recommendations. We can always make recommendations, sir. So, absolutely. Are you formalizing a recommendation at this moment?
Do I need to make a motion?
No. We don't do Robert's rules. But if you're formalizing a recommendation?
Yes, I am. I believe since this is the first time we've got feedback about what folks have experienced, there's always been comments, but now we have documented and researched, and
We've got data.
we've got data. What everyone likes to see is data. So now that we have data, I think we should make the recommendation to Portland Housing Bureau to further the efforts of Dr. Bates in doing this research so we can see how this affects the community and what the
I appreciate
response
your
is.
recommendation. I think, and I want everyone to have an opportunity to respond, and I'll come back to that if I can. Thank you, sir. Were there any other comments you had? Excellent. Ms. Virgie, any comments?
I found the report being necessary and important for us to hear back from the recipients of our planning and our work that we're doing. So I really appreciate the effort made and the report presented.
Yeah.
And the quality of the report is certainly well done.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Virgie.
I think this is great. One of the stats, the data points here that resonated a lot with me was this 91% agree that the history of the neighborhood matters to them.
Yeah.
As opposed to 19% across the nation. And we're in a city where obviously we talked numerous times over numerous meetings about marginalization and people being pushed out and how important it is for the area in which they live. It isn't just about the brick and mortar.
Yeah.
It is definitely the community, and I think it just magnifies to in some sense the importance of the work we're doing and the importance of why there's so much passion and why we get so worked up over it, sometimes even little things. It's because of a data point like that. So I think this is great, and I agree with Marlon.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Jillian.
I don't think I have anything of substance that I can add, but just thank you. This is great, and I look forward to the deeper dive in the data and some recommendations for future developments too.
Excellent.
One of the things that we've been talking about on the research team, Dr. Thurber and myself, we also had, I should say, we had two amazing students working with us in the summer collecting survey data, one of whom is a longtime Northeast resident and was really excited to be able to participate, SEI kid and now at grad school at PSU. So I want to shout that out as well. But we've been talking about also creating, more of a community event where we can talk about the findings and hear from residents and have the oversight committee and staff and providers come. So hopefully that will be something that y'all would be interested in coming to because, of course, we can share quotes and thoughts, but it's far more powerful to hear from the people themselves. Although, of course, as a researcher, I think it's also important to gather it all up and have it in a report systematically. So maybe when there's less threat of snow, we can create an event in one of the nice community spaces in the buildings.
I would, yes, and I would say please extend the invitation to all of those who participated in the process to be here in March as we celebrate 5 years of this work. So it would be great to have them in the room. There will be cake, and that's really what matters. There will be cake. And I've got more comments, but Ms. Goodlaw.
So I just have to say that, first of all, I mean, I know I'm not a member of the committee, and I've seen this information, and the first time I saw it, it made me tear up, and today I really had to hold myself together because this is why we're here.
Correct.
And the fact that when we started this, all I heard was, well, people are only going to apply because they want an affordable unit. It's not because they want to live in Northeast Portland. And so for your research to show that it wasn't just about the bricks and mortar, it was because they wanted to move back into the neighborhood that they knew or where their friends and family lived. So it is very emotional for me. But the other thing is that I had made, after our meeting, I made some inquiries with someone that's at the Meyer Memorial Foundation, and they are potentially interested in providing some funding for to extend and to add to the research. So I will call you to schedule a time to discuss that.
And just to be very transparent about what it is that we do with money for research, one thing is to support the students who assist. And so we were able to fund some graduate students in the School of Social Work who are training to become practicing social workers, so to pay them an hourly wage to help collect survey data. And we also provided stipends to all of our participants and meals and focus groups. So it's very much in the spirit of trying to support community, support PSU students, and our mission of trying to connect them more effectively with community. And so, the funds would go a long way toward being able to survey another 300 people, and as well as homeowners, as we go forward.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate your report today. So, Shannon, putting you on the spot. Is there any specific way we should go about making a recommendation to help further this kind of work? And I don't know that it only goes to the Portland Housing Bureau, but your thoughts or feedback on that.
You know, I sat down with, Dr. Bates's partner in this work and had the
Dr. Huber.
presentation on me, and I apologize for not remembering the doctor's last name. Thurber, thank you. But I have not done any kind of deep dive into budget potential. Though both Leslie and I think, have a similar vein of also seeing what we can do to help support the work going forward more broadly, whether that be with Housing Bureau resources or not, but whether that be with our full support. So I think the information that we got is really, we'd like to see continue, and we'd like to, as I think Mr. Holmes said, further Dr. Bates' work. So I don't have a specific way to answer the question with a specific funding source, but do know that we're as committed as you to see this work continue.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Perfectly answers the question, because I don't want to limit the support. And sometimes support isn't always in the form of dollars. Sometimes it's voice and leverage and resource and connections. And so.
Well, and I would like to, the one other thing I'd like to do is bring this research and some of the updated information we have on the preference policy. And I think that, we're going to see a lot of significant numbers of new people moving into the neighborhood, obviously, to the full meeting of the bureau directors that happens once a month, so that all of the other city bureaus can start to think about their role. I'm particularly thinking about the Parks Bureau programs as we bring folks back into the neighborhood or support them in staying in the neighborhood. So I think this data really gives us some strong statements to make to our other partners that are also hoping to support these families.
Excellent. Thank you. Jillian.
I just wanted to say that it's exactly this kind of research that I was talking about earlier when we talk about community engagement and equity lens with the Metro bond and how those funds get allocated and where they get allocated to. Yep. This is the kind of impact study that counteracts kind of a blanket survey over the city, because some people that may want to move back to Northeast Portland don't even live in the city and wouldn't get to participate in that kind of a survey. So it's just, this raising the importance of this work to the same level of the other community engagement work that's going on with the bond I think is critical in making sure that how we're defining equity and racial justice is clear.
Thank you very much. One of the things we know, 10,000 families are gone. We know the numbers. We know the percentages that have shifted in the last 20 years. And so depending on where you survey at this moment, the answers are very different. As well as it speaks to the need to educate the community that now has arrived and help to reduce some of the bias that is prevalent and evident. Also part of the strategy I had suggested to the prior mayor, and now am certainly talking to our current mayor about, that it's much more, again, than just building facilities. To that extent, our last item on our discussion tonight is about this incredible work that we've done. and offering an opportunity for more of the committee to participate in the reporting structure. For 3 years, I think it has been, I did the majority of the writing of that annual report. And then last year, we had a great team of people who jumped in and created a beautiful report that wasn't as, what was the word that was used? I'm trying to remember the word. Verbose or something similar to that. It was more picturesque and reflective of a variety of other ways of capturing data. I'd love for other people to participate in this particular year's report as well, and I know, Leslie, you were going to talk a little bit about that, so I kick it to you.
So actually, I have two things. First is the annual report. I have gone through and made some edits, and I have requested data for the last year to update what we reported out on last year, if we're going to report out on the same things. But what I'm going to send it out to all of you, and what I need to know is, are there other data points that you're interested in reporting out this year? And then Dr. Bates, what from your report today do we include? Because I think that that's very powerful, particularly with one of our commissioners who's not been as supportive of the preference policy as some of the other commissioners. And then last year, it worked really well for people to choose kind of sections that they would write some narrative, and then Dr. Holt and I went through and kind of edited it. And so that would be most helpful if once I send it out to you, that folks can say, hey, I'll take a shot at writing something about rental development, or I'll take a shot at writing something about whatever. And that way, it's as they say, many hands make light work.
It's a team effort.
It is a team effort, and then we can get something ready to go to the mayor's office by mid-February, because we have to get it to them 3 weeks prior to the council date, which is now tentatively scheduled for March 11th. So that's my ask. You don't have to say anything right now, but I would ask that you please respond when I send it to you by email. And then the second thing is that I think everybody knows about the Rose Quarter I-5 project that is moving forward. And I've been working with some folks from PBOT, and one of the current idea is to have potentially a steering committee that would include a member of this committee to participate. And they have sent me a statement that they want me to read to you, and then I can tell you kind of what the plan is. So the I-5 Rose Quarter project is a project of both statewide and local significance led by ODOT. The project adds auxiliary lanes and shoulders to reduce congestion and improve safety and operation on I-5. The project will smooth traffic flow on I-5 between 84 and 405, and it will also improve community connections with redesigned overpasses, reconnected neighborhood streets, enhance public spaces, and promote economic development opportunities. Developed by ODOT in partnership with the City of Portland, the project's transportation improvements will allow the city to implement its development goals for the North-Northeast area and realize the key elements of Central City 2035 plan. Given the unique nature of this mega project and range of challenges and opportunities the project presents, the City of Portland has been advocating for ODOT to convene a project steering committee. As proposed, the committee would include elected officials as well as community leaders. The North-Northeast Housing Strategy Committee has been identified as a key group that should be represented in this space. ODOT is awaiting formal direction from the Oregon Transportation Commission on how to charter any committees, but we wanted to share this as an informational announcement and offer to bring more information to you regarding the project as appropriate. So, I've been working with them, and since our next business meeting will not be until May, they wanted to provide some information because between now and May, because our March meeting is going to be our 5-year celebration, that we potentially could schedule some small group conversations about what's going on so that you guys could then elect someone to participate on the committee. So that's why I'm bringing you the information now, and then I'll be following up at a later date with some more information.
Well, having heard what you've heard, is there anyone on the committee? Marlon is interested. He's interested.
All right, Marlon.
Do we support Marlon? Is anybody? Marlon, you have self-selected. You have chosen number 2.
When does it start?
The Oregon Transportation Commission has to agree to the committee, and I think they're meeting either this week or next week. And so then once we know that, then the committee will start forming, and then so it could be a couple of months before the committee starts meeting, but I'll keep you posted.
Cool. I got to finish grad school.
You got to. Hey, this is exciting. Thank you for stepping up. I think you'd be a fantastic person to be engaged in it.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Any other comments questions from the committee? Let me go back to the end of the year report. Having heard what Dr. Bates just presented to us helps us to understand and ground why you have given yourselves to this work and shown up month after month after month, and the time that has been put into it. We are impacting families, and that's absolutely awesome to me. There are generations of people who are never going to know your name, but they're going to benefit from the work you've done. And so your collective wisdom, participating in, communicating this work, I would absolutely appreciate. So you hear me say it on a regular basis. I appreciate you guys. I do. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to open now to public comment. And I've got one, Miss Linda Tellis, if you would come on up. And if there was anyone else who had a comment tonight, we'd ask you just fill out a card. And Linda, you know how we do. If you will announce yourself, and let me get my timer together, you will have 3 minutes in just a moment.
Good evening. I'm Linda from PCRI. You guys know I always come up here, but this time I'm not fussing or anything like that. But I do want to say that I really appreciate what Dr. Bates presented tonight. You know, every time I get up, I always say I'm a part of the community and not coming up here as an employee of PCRI only. And what she presented tonight really represents, I feel like, what the community needs to, the voice that needs to be heard in these meetings. As you can see, every time we come to these meetings, hardly any of the community is present. It's mostly us who do the work, who are here, and we're having conversations about what we're going to do for the community. And unless we tell them to show up, they're not here. Not at this particular one. I know the other meetings, you see more of the community. So that's real important that we have that kind of information. And I'm saying that because I always say that I hold this committee, I hold you responsible for making sure the voice of the community is heard, and knowing what these issues and these policies and everything that comes across in these meetings, what they really, really represent, and not just here and as a person, but that you're able to study what is really happening. And so just to see that she put in that much effort, and I know you all are behind her and the city as well, in what she presented, I just want to make sure that you know, if a lot of the community members that I talk to are here, they would really appreciate what you presented tonight. And I just want to make sure you know that we appreciate that. And I can't wait till you get to the homeownership part so that you can interview some of those people as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I appreciate everyone else's attendance tonight. Thanks for spending some time and, risking the weather to get here. Yeah. In all seriousness, Happy New Year and have a great evening. Please let other people know about the March celebration. We'd love you to be present. Yes. Oh, we'll get information out so that people can register. And so I trust we have everybody's email. Have a great night. Thank you.